Welcome to the third episode of the ClassCast podcast. I'm Ryan Tibbins, and today my guest is Jessica Berg.
Hi.
And you are the first teacher guest. So where do you teach?
I teach at Rockridge High School.
Okay, and what do you teach?
I teach AP Language and Women's Studies.
Awesome. And so the Women's Studies thing is actually the reason that I thought that you would be a great person to do this, because one, I don't know you that well, so I have nothing to lean on. You know, other interviews have been former students. I've got nothing here. But you're also doing something new in the county. How long have you been thinking about creating that class?
It was something I always tried to incorporate aspects of in English through whatever I've been teaching book reading-wise. And then, like so many people, it was the 2016 elections that was kind of that real catalyst and push that something needs to change. It needs to be more than just sporadic elements incorporated in my regular English classroom. So that's when I really started pushing for an actual course.
Okay. Did, almost beta testing, did you do some or all of your women's studies materials in the AP Lang class?
No.
First, or this is just creating as you go?
Creating as I go. And that was pretty much all of last summer, was writing the curriculum and lesson plans and pretty much from the ground up, because, I took these courses in college, but that just doesn't really transfer to a high school classroom. I can't lecture for an hour and then be like, go read this material.
Yeah, I mean, you can, but it takes a select crowd of students,
right,
or a forgiving principal.
Right, exactly. And I really found through teaching the course, it was so much of me backfilling knowledge that just is not covered. Some things I thought should have been a given, and understanding, what the Equal Rights Amendment is, or what Title IX covers, and students did not know that.
Right.
So I really had to... But in 2016, because we were already in the middle of a school year, I started a group at Rockridge. Our mascot's the Phoenix, and I called it Ms. Phoenix, just for young women to come and talk about these issues. So that's where I really kind of forayed that and those conversations with students.
Okay. How much influence did those students have in what you've done?
Oh my gosh, they are the reason. Just because I saw an interest. It's one thing for me to have this idea and this want to teach it, or there's students that are going to take it and be interested in it, and this passion and really this need for it, that these are young women, junior, seniors in high school, getting ready to go out into the real world and not knowing certain things, and me as a teacher, as a woman, as a mother, feeling a responsibility to give them that. So they are the reason. They are absolutely.
Were there, not that I would expect many, if any, were there any males in the group?
Yes, and I had 2 gentlemen take it this year, and I think in terms of scheduling, 5 next year. Yeah.
That's it's like 2 sides of the same coin, that teaching a class like this provides all kinds of great awareness, culturally and personally and the rest. And so in a way, I would think in general it's probably more valuable to empower young women, but probably a lot of guys should be hearing some of this too. And so that was, how many kids would sign up for the elective and do that.
Right.
So all right, so background, and I don't remember if I mentioned this to you or not, but you did the professional development session last spring, winter, or something?
April, and I did a similar one in the pre-school year.
Okay, yeah. Sessions, so I went to the one in the spring, and I was the only dude in the room.
Yeah.
Which I didn't actually expect. I didn't expect many, but I looked in and I was like, all right, that's fine. I mean, I'm here to listen. And I thought it was funny because I really went in looking for essentially a reading list. I don't plan on teaching the course. I'm ill-qualified in a lot of ways, and I got a lot of good, essays and things that I'm going to try to work into my other classes. But I thought the way the discussion went was interesting, and there were maybe 2 times where you said something or someone in the room, another teacher makes a comment, and then there's this very slight pause, and I can feel eyes dart over at me. I'm I'm good. You say whatever, And so thinking about as the only, say, male teacher that showed up, did you have any guys at the other one that you'd done?
Yes, but he is a coworker of mine,
Okay.
Paul Koch, and he's phenomenal and very encouraging, and so he used to me and that type of discussion.
Yeah. So I thought it was great, and this is, I don't know if this is a good thing or this might be. I certainly don't want to take anything away from the rest of the presentation, but aside from a reading list, the thing that struck me the most was like a little thought experiment that you shared. And we'll talk about this later, but I've been doing a lot of this in class, like a lot of thought experiments and philosophy stuff. But when you said sort of imagine, what would you do, how would the world be if as a woman all men disappeared for, I forget, it was like a week or 4 days or something like that. It's like assume that your gas stations and hospitals keep running, but that otherwise just men disappear. And I thought about it. I was like, yeah, if all women disappeared, and that was your joke. And this is where we'll stray into like, is that classroom appropriate? But it was, what would men do if women disappeared? And it was like there was this slight pause, and everyone looked at me, and you're like, they'd probably just like jerk off. And I was like, yeah. I thought about it. I was like, that's probably it. There'd probably be more fist fights too. I think there's a lot of times like guys would like have fun, just fight, and you don't because it would upset a woman around you. And I was like, it would probably just be a lot of fist fights and masturbation. Nothing else would change. But on the reverse of it, and I mean, what's your answer to it? Like, if all men disappeared, because women in the room had a lot of stuff that I never even crossed my mind.
Right.
But like, if all men disappeared,
my biggest one is just being able to go for a run, like around my own neighborhood when it's dark outside, and I still carry mace to do that, and it's still one of those things. It's that constant alertness that it just becomes a second nature as a woman. Like parking garages, I try to avoid them at all costs, and so just little things like that, and that's.
Yeah, and that's that subtle sort of thing, and I thought it was a really good, like, I'm going to actually use that in my classes this year, just as a demonstration, because you can even take it outside of sex or gender, and you can. I was thinking about it afterwards. I'm like, you could even do that, like with a race issue. Mm-hmm. If all white people disappeared, what would be different for black people in this country? And like, man, and as a middle class white male, like, I very rarely have to question this, and so that was the thing, though, that really got me thinking, like, this is really a conversation worth having in the classroom. Do you present that to kids in class?
Yes, and I had actually heard that thought experiment a little later on in the class. The one that is often presented is, and this would be more applicable or a more high school friendly topic, if you ask, like, on a daily basis, what do you do to protect yourself? And so, women list these things they're always taught, like park in well-lit areas, carry your keys between your knuckles, don't go to the bathroom alone. People are always asking, like, why do you go to the bathroom in groups? Because it's safe. And most young men, and this is done in a lot of college courses, are like, I don't do anything, really at the forefront of my mind. And so that kind of starts that conversation.
Do you think that that's, I mean, obviously a lot of that's taught, but do you think any part of that is, I don't know if I want to use the word natural, like building, like, has some of that just evolved, do you think? Like,
meaning?
Well, like, I don't know. When I was young, like, my dad taught me early on, and my dad's a great guy, but especially when he was young, he had a very bad temper. Like, he got in a lot of fights. And when I was little, like elementary school, middle school, like, I got in a lot of fights. I don't know why. People would say something and you'd hit them. Like, I don't know. And over time, I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, that's not necessary. But from an early age, anytime, and I probably still do it subconsciously, but I used to do it and think about it. I'd walk into a room of, like, if there's guys I don't know, my first thought is I look around the room, and it's two things, like, who looks friendly, and which guys in this room could I not beat in a fight? And so I don't know that everyone does that consciously, but I've had a similar conversation with male students who are like, yeah, I guess I do kind of think that, like
sizing one another
up. And it's not that, and I mean, even like very non-aggressive students have said, yeah, I guess I kind of think about it. Is that a thing you think is taught? Like, are young men just automatically just thinking about it so they don't think about protecting themselves because that's already there? They're like, do women think that? Do you look at another woman like, could I take her? Like,
no, and I think that's interesting because I think that male aspect of sizing one another up comes from a different perspective where it's like, not to go with like the stereotypical like alpha male type of thing, but I think a lot of it's so much instinctual, whereas like a woman is this kind of self-preservation on the other side.
Yeah, and that's I guess what I'm thinking is like how much of that is just a part of sort of the psychology that has evolved either biologically or culturally or whatever.
Right.
That's just how you start to think, versus how much of that is, imprinted on us. So are women cautious just because they're cautious, or are women cautious because they're taught to be cautious? I mean, and obviously the point here is that no one should have to be taught, right?
No, but it's interesting because it's, I always use the phrase so much in class, like at the end of the day, we're animals, our base instinct is survival. And so I think some of it is biological, like evolutionary, and then I think the nuances of it today are cultural,
right?
Right.
Yeah, I just, I thought like, wow, and I actually, I floated that a couple days ago, after I'd emailed you, I was talking to a friend, and I was just like, I just wondered, and I said, what would you do if all women disappeared? He's like, I don't know, whatever. And he's like, I'd eat Cheetos in my underwear because my wife wouldn't yell at me or something. Like, it was something stupid. And I was like, and I explained like how different that answer probably would be for a woman. He's like, I don't know. And it's like he started to disagree, and there was a pause. And I guess I see your point. And I thought, that right there, like, that alone is a good enough reason to think more carefully about gender roles and I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. And that was, again, not to take anything away from the rest of the whole discussion was good, but that was the thing that like really stuck with me, because then for the next like 3 days after that professional development, I just kept thinking about that and then substituting different groups of people. If this group of people disappeared, and I thought like, I don't know. How much of the class, say thinking about that, how you said, the nuance of some of these issues, say now in our culture at this time, how much of the class deals with very current issues in text compared to like how much modern stuff you're doing compared to reading Elizabeth Cady Stanton? Like, what's the balance?
So when I started writing it, my just starting point was the 19th Amendment, and I kind of framing this question: why did women even have to fight for the right to vote? Why was that not a given? And so then I kept going back to like, how did this rise of the patriarchy really happen when you look at prehistory and stuff and more egalitarian societies and women were goddesses and stuff. And so then me being me, that's where I started. And so I had this whole course outline up to, first, second, third, fourth wave feminism into the future. Right. And inevitably I would come into a class like, here's what we're going to cover today. And, this past year alone was just like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, scrap that. Let's talk about what's going on in our real world.